Welcome to this episode of the Legal Paige Podcast. So today's episode is all about how to reschedule and charge some type of cost for changing a date for full service wedding planners. Now, full service wedding planners are a bit different when it comes to rescheduling than other wedding vendors, such as a photographer or a videographer or a DJ or even a venue for that matter. And in episode 73 of the Legal Paige Podcast, I talked all about should you charge a rescheduling fee? And that was basically pertaining to a flat rescheduling fee for kind of day of wedding and event vendors. But full service wedding planners are a bit different. And I was on a Clubhouse room. If you guys don't know about Clubhouse, it's this new app that everybody talks on. It's all audio. And I was invited as a guest of Brandee Gaar's morning show. And someone popped up on stage and asked the question surrounding, well, I don't think this flat rescheduling fee model works for full service wedding planners. And with that question, I knew we needed a whole new revamped episode specifically for full service wedding planners and how to go about a rescheduling process with clients in 2021. And that is why I invited my friend and luxury event wedding planner, Brandee Gaar, who was the host of this Clubhouse room, to be a guest on this episode today. So Brandee is a luxury event planner, thought leader, educational speaker, and host of the She Who Dares podcast. As a lifelong lover of all things, Brandee spent 7 years as a corporate event planner with the prestigious Gaylord Hotels brand before opening her own event consulting firm. Blush by Brandee Gaar and 11 Events by Blush have quickly become known for their over-the-top events and high-touch standard of customer service in her area. Brandee is passionate about teaching new and aspiring entrepreneurs her exact strategies in growing 2 six-figure businesses. She provides expert tools for those who are ready to take their side hustle into a full-time passion, and her goal is to help businesses beat the statistics by starting with a success-minded focus. And I'm just so excited that this episode is specifically geared towards rescheduling and changing dates with clients as a full-service wedding planner. We're diving into everything on why I think you need to do this differently and not charge a flat rescheduling fee as a full-service wedding planner, how you do this legally with various documents and sending them new contracts and canceling your existing contract. And then Brandee gives you practical tips as a full-service wedding planner on how you can go about doing this in the best way possible and really communicating with your clients to ensure that rescheduling process is really smooth. And then I bring in all of the smooth legal tips as well. So let's get into this, my friends. You're listening to the Legal Paige Podcast, where we chat about life and business with a legal twist. I'm Paige, attorney and photographer helping online businesses and creatives tackle their business dreams without breaking out in hives. No more legal mumbo jumbo. This podcast features simple, bite-sized advice that'll have you legally legit in no time. Are you ready? Let's get started. Okay, my friends, thank you so much for tuning in today. I am beyond excited because Brandee Gaar is here to talk all about rescheduling fees and in particular, how that looks for a full service wedding planner right now. Brandee, thanks for jumping on.
Yes, I can't wait. This is going to be a fun topic.
It's going to be so awesome. So Brandee, obviously I know who you are. Lots of my listeners probably know who you are, but I would love for you to introduce yourself and kind of explain what you do. And I know you're a wedding planner, but you also have other businesses too. And then if you wouldn't mind then just diving into how this topic came about and why you and I decided to jump on a podcast as quickly as possible.
Yeah, that was kind of a whirlwind for sure. But my name is Brandee Gaar, like Paige said, and I'm a wedding planner in Orlando, Florida. We run a luxury event planning service here. And I'm also the owner of 11 Events by Blush, which is our corporate event planning company. So we do both weddings and corporate events. I also have my own podcast, the She Who Dares podcast. It's a podcast for creative small business owners. And I'm an educator and speaker for the wedding industry. And yeah, Paige and I were chatting earlier this week. I host a daily morning show. It's every weekday at 10 a.m. Eastern on Clubhouse, my new favorite addiction. And Paige came on and we were talking about rescheduling fees because that's definitely a topic that's been coming up so much on her platform. And oh my gosh, it was such a hot room. we could not get it to close because there was so many amazing questions. And one of the things that came up is how with full service wedding planners, we are a little bit unique or a lot of bit unique when we're talking about rescheduling fees, because different from a DJ or a photographer, there's not a lot of work pre-wedding that's done with those vendors. Of course, there's a few things here and there, but with a full service wedding planner and even in some respects, event management, we're doing a ton. Well, all of our work is done really prior to the wedding day. Such a small portion of our work is the wedding day. So rescheduling fees are something that we've really been kind of going back and forth with, thinking, okay, this has to look different for planners because we've put an incredible amount of work into the wedding by the time it gets rescheduled. And then we have so much work to reschedule it. And so that's really how this topic came up. And immediately after the show, Paige and I were messaging back and forth like, okay, this has to be a podcast. And she was like, how fast can we get this recorded? So I'm excited to chat a little bit more about it today.
Yeah, me too. And Brandee, thanks so much for, jumping on in like basically 3 days time. But I thought it was really important for you all to listen to, especially on the Legal Paige podcast, because we did just have an episode about how to charge a rescheduling fee and what to charge. And I just want to be really upfront and honest here and say, my mindset was a photographer, a videographer, a DJ, and, just basically also a venue probably too. Mm-hmm. I was just thinking in that frame of mind, like, okay, you have a set fee. Like if you have to reschedule, you probably haven't done a lot of services at this point. And so I'm only thinking in that episode, if you go and listen to it as well, it's probably going to be 1 or 2 episodes ago from when this one airs. But it says rescheduling fee in the title. So just go check it out. Yeah. And I talk a lot about how, and Brandee and I went into this in the Clubhouse room too, on how I would suggest doing kind of like a 30% of your package fee or right around your retainer fee for a rescheduling fee and have it like a flat rate amount. And I explain all of this in the episode and in the podcast room on why this would be best practice for ensuring that your fee is quote unquote reasonable, because that is legally what you have to deem it as, and for a court to uphold your fee as being a sufficient and reasonable amount. But it doesn't work for wedding planners. So we had a guest, I guess we had someone pop up to the stage. I don't know. How do you say this, Brandee? You're the Clubhouse guru.
That's right. They popped up to the stage. Yes.
So we had a full service wedding planner that actually Brandee's decently good friends with. And she popped up and was saying, hey, Paige, like I don't really agree with you. And I don't think this works particularly for full service planners, because as Brandee kind of explained here at the beginning of, her introducing herself. And in this episode, she was like, well, day of really is a very minor portion of our services. And that's true, because if you're doing, I don't know, I'm just going to throw numbers out there, 12 hours on a wedding day. And that's, I don't know. What is the amount of hours, Brandee? 12, 14?
Absolutely. 12 to 14. Yeah. And full service, we put anywhere from 150 to 175 hours in. So, it's a blip in the screen.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to like give numbers to people and be like, it actually is a blip.
Yeah, it's a blip. Yeah, it's like the amount of work that goes into these weddings ahead of time, it's people don't even understand it because, obviously that's what we love to do, but there's so much research, there's so much design, there's so much working back and forth with the vendor. So it's by the time we get to the day of, we're like, the work's done. So now we just have to let it do its thing.
Yeah, exactly. So in that respect, what do you do? Is it a rescheduling fee, or are you just essentially canceling where you're at in that existing contract with your client and then moving forward. So before I kind of get into what I would suggest legally for wedding planners, I would love to hear kind of what you have found in the wedding planning industry for full service planners in particular, because I think day of planners are very similar to like photographers and videographers, where you can really extrapolate like, how much work have you really done for them prior to them rescheduling? You're probably just going to shift that over, right? And charge a rescheduling fee. So it's going to be very similar there. So just very particular for full service wedding planners. What have you heard as kind of the industry trend for doing reschedulings now, especially in 2021, now that kind of last year is a thing of the past with COVID-19 and force majeure?
Thank God. Yeah. I mean, really what's been super, super trendy in our industry, or what we're hearing over and over and over again, is the importance of having really a phased based planning, so that you know how much work is being done as each payment is being made, if that kind of makes sense. So, and also so that you can say, this is the work that's been done, and it's very, very clear. In our industry, what happens a lot is we don't necessarily put a lot of things in writing, or we don't have systems to back up the work that's being done. And so, a client can come and say, well, I don't actually think that much work has been done. And this is why it's so important to document it, to make sure that you know exactly how much work that you've been doing on that wedding, and that you can prove it if it was called into court, as we've seen that that's actually happened. And so it's really, really important to do that. But when you're thinking about the way that you plan your wedding, or that you're planning a wedding, having that phase-based approach, which is kind of what it's being dubbed now, is that, you've got kind of phase one, and this is how much work we're doing in phase one. Now we're in phase two. This is how much work is being done in phase two. When someone reschedules, it's not just, okay, well, tell the venue. I mean, every single vendor, you have to find a new date. And it's like, that in itself is hours of work, and saying, well, we have to have all these same vendors, really. And so you're kind of figuring out how you're going to mitigate those costs if you do have to drop a vendor because of a date change. And there's really an incredible amount of work. So, as we're moving into 2021, I think that these rescheduling fees are going to change, because as you've probably seen too, Paige, right when this all happened, of course, all of us were just like, we're not charging rescheduling fees. Of course, we're just going to help you. And so we were just jumping in, head first, helping our clients. But now, as we're starting to get into contracts that have rescheduled one or two times, or contracts that were signed after we clearly knew that there was a pandemic, the game is changing a little bit. And now that's where this is coming in.
Yeah, because essentially you just did complimentary reschedules to keep goodwill with your clients. Correct. And obviously none of that was anybody's fault, that COVID-19 basically forced them to not have the wedding that they wanted, whether that's because of a shutdown or whether that's because of maximum people at an event, so on and so forth. But that was all cost to you that wasn't included in your existing contract, right? You're spending hours and hours and hours solidifying a date, working with vendors, reviewing their contracts as a full service wedding planner,
for sure.
And being like, oh my God, will they allow you to reschedule? You're basically taking on the brunt work and bearing, all of that on your shoulders on behalf of the client. And I know this, you guys, just personally, because I had a full service wedding planner for my wedding that was supposed to be in November 2020. And it was a destination wedding. There was a lot of things that had gone on. And that was a big thing, was like, do you want us to reach out to the vendors? Do you want to reach out to the vendors? So you are saying that, previously in 2020, most wedding full service planners were obviously just trying to keep their clients, do good on their clients, and they basically didn't charge for that. And in that point in time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, obviously there's outliers, but I think the trend overall for full service planners was none of us knew this was going to happen. I think the hardest part of that, though, was for us. We had so many weddings. We were in spring season, which here is very, very busy. And so we had so many weddings that were the weekend of the shutdown and, the next 4 or 5 weeks. none of us knew how long this was going to last. So of course we said to all of them, let's just find you an open date this September, because that's a little bit before our busy season. Let's just find open dates. So we rescheduled everyone to September. And then, as we all know how that played out, lo and behold, COVID wasn't done. And so really those first 2 reschedules for our full service clients, we were doing at our cost. And I think a lot of vendors were doing that. That second one, I'd say maybe, there was a handful of people that maybe charged, but none of us knew for those first batch of clients what was going to happen. So we moved them all to the fall, then the fall couldn't happen either. So, but now that we've got these brides that are in spring of 2021 or summer or fall of 2021, the game has to be different. At some point, we have to stop the bleeding, and we have to understand that there's not just date availability, which is what we think about when we're thinking of our day of clients or our event management clients, or what DJs or photographers are thinking about. This is really, okay, how many hours can I possibly put into another date change? And think about it, you guys. We know how brides and grooms are. Anytime they have more time to think about something, and they're in a pandemic, so they have nothing to do anyway, they're on Pinterest. So we've definitely had this experience where we've had clients redesign their wedding because now they're like, well, I have more time to think about it. And I'm like, no, time out. We already had your wedding planned. We're just copy pasting to the new date. And they're like, no, I want to change. So there's been that aspect of it too. And we're trying to kind of manage that is, hey, that's a different contract. So, but it's different for everyone. It's new for everyone.
I love all of this. And we talked about this on the Clubhouse room, which is why I wanted to get into it a little more in depth with you here on the Legal Paige podcast. Because for legal purposes, I think there's like 2 ball games here.
Yeah.
The first is, are you going to keep your existing contract as is and you're just like rescheduling, right? They're not changing the full gambit of their mood board and like all of their plans. They're keeping with the majority of the same vendors. Like how much more do you have to do? I think in that respect, it's probably just going to be continuing on with that existing contract, probably having some type of contract addendum that you sign that of course reschedules the date again. I think it's important in that document too, to explain probably some type of like new updated COVID policy. That's like, this is your final scheduling that we will allow under this contract, and thereby the contract will be terminated if you decide to reschedule again, and we're going to have to start from square one. And then probably assessing some type of fee for your services and your time in rescheduling everything, because essentially you could transfer everything over that you've already done if they're going to do the same thing, but you still have all of these fees that you're not getting paid for your time spent in helping them reschedule. And so that's how I would kind of position that to your clients is, and this is something, was it Becca?
Yeah. So it was Becky that brought this up, and it was so great. What she was talking about is that, really as the wedding planner, in all cases, it's our responsibility to be really helping our clients to understand, as a full service wedding planner, what to look for in vendors, what questions to ask, what to expect, what kind of deposits to expect. Like that's our job, is to educate our clients so that they know what to prepare for as the planning process moves on. What I think that really we talked about in the Clubhouse room that was really so glaringly important is that as full service wedding planners, it's now become our job when that client starts to have the first conversation about rescheduling, or I think I might postpone, or I'm not sure about the wedding date. The very first conversation we need to have with them is, okay, I completely understand. Let's talk about why you feel that way. And then know that there's going to be additional fees that may come along with that. There's going to be rescheduling. And one of the things I love that she said was, we don't say the word rescheduling because we want to keep it as far away from them doing that as possible. But we do want to let them know that this isn't, on everyone else's dime. This is going to cost a dollar amount at this point, because now it's a choice you're making to reschedule. It's no longer force majeure.
Yeah. And so that's what she was saying too. Do you remember her name and her business, just so we can give her a shout out?
Yes, absolutely. I may have to look it up, but it's Becky Krug. I don't know the name of her business though.
Okay. Well, we'll make sure to put it in the show notes. You guys always like to give cred where cred is due. So in that respect, she was kind of saying like, don't use the word rescheduling fee, but you could maybe say, date change cost or something along those lines where it's a little less aggressive of a term in your contract addendum. And you're obviously, like Brandee's saying, you're working with your clients, you're communicating with them on all of this, right? Like, what are the costs associated with rescheduling or changing their date again, and why you would be charging said amount. As you can tell, I'm trying to not use the word fee, because I think a rescheduling fee to them is like, well, you've already done everything. Like, why am I having a fee? Right. And so explaining to them, and this is something where that's why I'm trying to say like ball game one here is like they're basically keeping everything as is. They're just moving to a new date. Maybe they have like minor changes in their vendor team just because maybe someone isn't available. But for the most part, probably like same venue, same setup, same planning that you've done to the point of changing the date. But then you probably have some type of cost associated with you helping with the change of date. So that would be in like a contract addendum. Yeah. But I think what Brandee and I ultimately just had this like aha moment on the Clubhouse room was actually it's probably like way better to just cancel your existing contract and start afresh with a totally new contract. And here legally is why that's important. One, it's easier for you to prove that you've performed all of the services under the existing contract. It obviously, I can't tell you what it would be specifically for your wedding planning business and the facts and circumstances of that reschedule with a client. Because like Brandee said, I think some people had like a payment process throughout in different phases, and clients had paid, in increments, so to speak, due to the fact that you are working in increments and in phases for planning their wedding. So I would, let's just throw out numbers here, Brandee. I think this is probably easiest for people. Yeah. So say it's a $10,000 wedding planning full service package that you have with a client. I'm just going to make this easy with round numbers. Perfect. Say that they paid like a $2,000 retainer to book you for your services for that first date. And probably the first few months of working with them is kind of included. Wedding planners are a little bit different, right? Because they book with you and then you're helping with everything at the beginning stages. Correct. So that retainer is for retaining your services, but also like probably I'd say the first month or two of work. I'm just throwing this out there. Then you can kind of revise as needed. But that's what I would suggest. And I think that's probably what an attorney could argue. Like, you're owed that retainer. Here's what it's for. And then you probably, let's say they do have installment payments over time. Hopefully this is the case, because otherwise you're in a separate scenario where they've only paid you a retainer and they haven't paid anything more, but you're kind of owed more. So you have to send an invoice to your clients, and that's just yucky.
Don't do that. That's terrible. Yeah.
So if they pay in increments, maybe they've paid another $2,000 and another $2,000. So now you're at $6,000. Let's say let's do 90 days out. You're three months out from the wedding, which is probably a good indicator of where we're at now for lots of full service wedding planners. Maybe you're right at the beginning of the summer of 2020, and they want to reschedule. You could just cancel your contract at this point in time and say, I've already worked this $6,000 worth of work. We have everything ready to go. Everything's done, but now there's like all these changes that need to be made, and maybe the venue's not available. And like you said, maybe they have a whole new mood board on Pinterest and they want to change everything. It's best legally to be like, okay, I have all the fees that you've paid at this point in time have already been used towards my services. And maybe you could wiggle room a little bit and be like, okay, like I understand, maybe we'll transfer like 1,000 of that over. I'll give you credit for your new contract, but here's the amount that I have worked. That's so clean cut to your clients to be like, yes, I understand you have done all of this work for me. I know I'm asking much more of you. So let's do a new contract. You can decide. I feel like that gives the full service wedding planners the power to be able to extrapolate the hours they've actually worked for that client. Maybe you are just transferring over a retainer for reserving a date, but you're not transferring over the rest of the hours you've already worked.
Yeah. And that, Paige, you described it really, really well. I mean, I cannot express how important it is. And Paige, you've done episodes on this, that you need to be charging as you go, especially as a wedding planner, but you need to be charging, do not charge a 50% retainer upfront. I know you talk about this all the time, Paige, and then not do 50% of the work because you're going to owe people back. So with full service wedding planning, most of us do a phase-based payment plan that goes along with our work. So for my company, for instance, we do 3 payments. We also plan our weddings in 3 phases. So it's super clear how much work has been done, and a payment gets made as we begin the next phase of planning each time. And so really it's very, very obvious how much work has been done. We're able to document it very clearly and say this is how much has been done. And then I 100% agree. For full service weddings, especially, if a client decides that they want to move the date, you can really see where you are in the scope of that planning. If they just made phase 2 payment and they literally just told you, you may be able to transfer that phase 2 payment to the next wedding and say, okay, well, you've already paid for phase 2, but we haven't even started that part yet. So the retainer is going to be lost, but we're going to start a new contract, but I will credit you for that second payment. But it really is going to have to come down to what work has been done and how you can show that. Because really at the end of the day, like you always say, Paige, it's how much work has been done. And can you show that to a judge? Is it reasonable? And so if you take a 50% retainer up front and you're only 2 months into the planning, I would say that'd be hard pressed to actually say that you did 50% of the work yet. So I think it's in that respect, I think it is a little bit different for each client, not meaning that your policy is different, but how much work has been done for each client. And I think that it's the right thing to do, that if you haven't started the work for the payment that has been made, to be able to transfer that to the new date. I think that's good faith. And showing your clients, listen, I have the best interest for you as well, but I have to be paid for the work that's been done. And on the flip side of that, I mean, if they're getting ready to make payment 3, so you're like, you finished phase 1, you finished phase 2, they haven't paid phase 3 yet. I mean, all of that work has been done. So to transfer money would really just be because it's something, I guess, that you want to do, but really you've done that work and it's going to have to be done again.
Yeah. I mean, you hit everything you just extrapolated on everything I wanted to say. So it's very helpful to have someone who is a full service wedding planner here kind of go through this with me. I would add on to that, Brandee, that I would suggest, if you are, let's just take this 3-phase approach here that she's talking about. I would even suggest that you do maybe you have way more work in one of the phases. So just bear with me here.
Sure.
If we have a $10,000 wedding planning full service package, I would suggest that you still take a certain amount that's just for a retainer to reserve the date. Yeah. Like you will not be, having any other weddings on that date, or, I know you have a team, so maybe you take up to 3 weddings on a weekend. They're one of the 3, right? That's what the retainer is reserving. I would have that separate from your phase 1 fee, your phase 2 fee, and your phase 3 fee.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Because it's easier, again, to explain to a judge, well, okay, I lost out. There's an opportunity cost there for that retainer. I could have had another client still decide to have their wedding on that date. And my planning still would have, I still would have had all of that income and costs coming in from that wedding.
Yeah.
So that the retainers also, quasi-liquidated damages for you losing out on another client on that date. But then you can easily show to a judge, if you were to get in this scenario, right? Like Brandee and I are just trying to arm you guys with a bunch of really good arguments you can make towards your client so that you can just come to a resolution with your client. But God forbid, you do get in some legal battle. This is an argument that's going to be had back and forth with attorneys before you even get to a lawsuit phase. Right. So I would suggest, you have those separate payments to show where you're at. And if they have, kind of prepaid, then you can transfer. It's all in good faith. And that's what a judge is going to look at, the facts and circumstances of what you have been paid for and what services then you have performed for those payments. So all in all, I would say it's basically 2 ball games, like I was talking about, the one where it's easier to just reschedule again. There's some type of like cost associated, right, with the change date cost. And then you're just kind of adding on a contract addendum to your existing full service wedding planning contract. I would say that's probably a minority right now of where people are at. I wouldn't suggest that for many people. And that's kind of what I was suggesting in that other rescheduling fee episode. I would suggest that most full service wedding planners are probably in the position where you just need to be like, this is what I've worked on. This is what you've paid. I've lost, you don't get to transfer that retainer. I've already transferred it a couple of times for you for free. And now I've lost out on all these other clients. So we're going to cancel the contract here. Maybe in good faith, you're like, I can transfer maybe $1,000 of my work because we won't have to redo that for this new date and this new planning that you have with me. And so again, you're trying to work with your clients more and more, be very, very communicative with them on what you have done under the contract, what you haven't done. And then say it's at, you're at like $5,000 of that $10,000 package. You just end there and you start afresh. And so the rescheduling fee essentially becomes your new retainer.
Yeah, it just becomes a whole new contract. And I think it really is a breath of fresh air for everyone. And one thing I would say to remember, and I even caution new planners when they're just starting to do full service as well, is, a bride or groom does not know what they don't know for the future. So we know that they're going to change their mind. I mean, that's just life. They've got a whole additional year to plan. The trends are changing, times are changing, friends are getting in their ear. So they can tell you at that rescheduling meeting, oh, it's literally going to be copy paste. We're not going to change a thing. So could you just charge us the $500 retainer, or hopefully your retainer's higher than that. But, could you just charge us the retainer and put everything else towards it? Cause it's literally going to be copy paste. Here's the thing. It won't be a copy paste, because even if you were able to get all of those vendors to somehow be available on this new date, it's so much work for you to say, okay, wait, so venue has this date open. Okay, photographer, do you have this date open? And then venue only has this space available. And so DJ, it's a giant puzzle. And we all know that as full service planners. And there's going to have to be hard conversations. They're going to have to be had that you're not going to have to step into, like, hey, bride and groom, every vendor's available except photographer. What do you want to do? How important is this photographer? Because here's how much we're going to lose if we just book a different photographer. So those are all conversations that you're going to have to lead them through. And it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of energy from your other clients. So we all know there's going to be more work in it than just copy paste. So give yourself that value, know that it's going to happen, and educate your clients on that and say, this is why I'm not able to just copy paste. It won't be that way. And you want to be able to provide that service to them. Say you've walked through this. It's so difficult on all of us. I want to take as much stress off of you as I possibly can. And so I'm going to be here every step of the way to make this reschedule as smooth as possible. So it's really kind of another sales process too, because no one's just going to be like, you know what? Yeah, you totally earned that $6,000. Start me a new contract. Like, you're going to have to explain why. And I think it's very reasonable, the reasoning behind it.
Yeah. And I think in your, new contract as well, people are probably like, well, Paige, what do we put in this new contract? You need to explain that. Like, in your fee section, you need to explain kind of like, if you are transferring something over, what is it for? Make sure you're also, of course, you should have this in any wedding planning contract, but anything beyond the scope of the project at the time of contracting, right? So if they do want to move things over and then they decide 6 months later, I've had a lot of time to look at my Pinterest board, I am going to change XYZ, that you can upcharge for that. So you want to make sure you have those type of clauses, anything beyond, the project scope kind of language in your contract, that you have those in there as well to kind of double back, protect you as you're transferring over to a new contract. And like Brandee said, if you do decide to change, transfer any amounts that they have paid over, that needs to be fully explained in your fee section on why you're doing it and what it's exactly for, and then what additional fees or hourly rates are going to cost for you as well. My next question, Brandee, that I'm just interested in from a planner's perspective, not from an attorney's perspective, but do you see a lot of planners have kind of language in their contracts surrounding the availability of a venue being kind of a caveat to rescheduling and whether fees need to be involved or not?
No, I really genuinely have not seen a lot of planners have language like that in their contracts. I think that definitely could be coming. But that's a huge challenge right now really most venues, or certainly here in my area, but a lot of venues can only host one event per day, or at least in the space that you're in, they can only host one event. And so that's definitely one of the biggest challenges that we have as planners, for sure. But no, I haven't seen it included in a planner's language yet.
Yeah. And I would be really cautious to that effect. Legally speaking, you should really only be subject to your availability specifically within your contract, right? Your contract's to protect you as a business owner. So if you're a full service wedding planner, while your clients have their dream venue, if they're rescheduling due to COVID or due to some other force majeure reason, I don't know, maybe someone's listening to this in 2025 and they're like, COVID's not even an issue anymore.
Right.
Hopefully. Maybe they're thinking, well, the venue shut down or something along those lines. How does that impact my contract? It shouldn't. Because you should be able to plan that event at any location. And that's your argument there legally. That, they might have their dream venue, but if something were to happen with the venue, that's on the venue, that's not on you. And so you can have, reasonable accommodations to that effect in terms of what you want to do for your clients and how you can kind of transfer everything you've worked on to just a new location. I wouldn't suggest having availability of a venue in a wedding planning contract. I think there's way better ways to get around that and work with your clients. But I do think you need something around your availability in a contract.
100%. It needs to include your availability. Here in Central Florida, sadly and probably shockingly, we've had a handful of venues, not because of COVID, but before COVID, that shut down randomly, either because of financial reasons or, we had one burn down. And absolutely, that's when this all comes into play. It's like, well, my venue burned down, and all the vendors are like, well, we'll all rally, of course, and we help you find a new venue, but that doesn't mean all of our contracts are null and void. You can still have your wedding. No. So it's not just COVID. For many, many reasons, protect yourself against that, because we deal with it. I'd say we deal with it probably twice a year here, where we have venues shut down for various reasons, and we have to have that conversation with the client for sure.
Yep. I love that. I think that's a good, round out on that, change with availability of venues and planners, and just worry about your own availability, you guys, and put that in your contract, and all else will fall under, kind of your force majeure clauses and what you're going to do moving forward if something were to happen to a venue, or even another vendor. You shouldn't be beholden to a photographer, shutting down their business, and it was your client's dream photographer, and then they're like, okay, well, I don't even want to do this wedding anymore. I'm going to do something totally different. I'm going to cancel. That's not how it works.
No, that's not how it works. And actually, that's even more reason why I say that full service planners should be charging that full amount to change the date, because that's the kind of stuff that we deal with. Even outside of COVID, we deal with that all the time. If a venue shuts down or something, if a venue shuts down and then you have to find a different dream venue, and now maybe your photographer's not available on that date, or maybe the planner's not available on that date. That's the client's choice to decide which is more important. And we have clients all the time that'll say, you know what? This photographer is more important than this venue. So I'm going to go with the photographer's availability. And you kind of have to have a pecking order. That's how we start it with our clients, is we say, which one of your vendors is most important? That sounds horrible, but there's a lot of brides and grooms, couples that pick their photographer first, and then they pick around that. Then they pick around that availability. So when you're starting that rescheduling process, that tough conversation, it's very hard to have, where you say, hey, DJ's not available. And I know we've already paid $1,000 deposit, but at this point, if we move forward with this date, it's our choice to cancel. So they're going to be able to keep that, and we're going to have to find another DJ. And obviously that depends on what the DJ's contract says, but that hopefully it says exactly that it's their choice at this point. And that happens honestly a lot right now because it's hard to find 24 vendors all available on the same new date. So they kind of have to decide, which deposits to lose.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's such solid information for wedding planners that are listening. And I'm not a full service wedding planner, so I would have had no idea that's what you do. But okay, let's go back to contracts here just so I can kind of input where I think people are in ballgame number 2, because we talked about ballgame number 1. And then I just have a couple closing questions for you, Brandee. So ballgame number 2 is you've performed basically at least over 50% of, your full package price in services rendered already, hours that you've worked on that client's planning. So I would suggest at that point that you send them some type of termination agreement. You could probably phrase it differently. I don't know if it would be a cancellation agreement or probably cancellation, terminate. You'd have a conversation to terminate that existing contract.
Right.
And in that though, you can have very friendly language in terms of why you're canceling that existing contract. You just need to make sure that it's crossed out and you have to have them sign that. And you can have language in there surrounding what transfers over or what moves or what they have on credit. And then you would sign them a whole new contract. The best part is here, Brandee, and this goes really well and transfers well into my question, is your new contract is going to be your newest contract. So it's going to be your most up-to-date contract. It's going to include all of the things that you've added and changed over time since your client originally booked with you. And so my question for you is, Brandee, what are some of the key things you've seen for full service wedding planners that have changed or you've changed in contracts basically since March in 2020?
Oh my gosh. Not allowing the date change is really one that oh my gosh, it's so crazy how many times we've revised our contract. Well, we actually use all of your contract templates now, Paige, because I was like, this has gotten out of control. We've got to use all of Paige's contracts because, it's funny. We've updated ours so many times. I feel like I don't even know what our changes would be. But for sure, it would be that, if they knowingly are going into COVID, if they knowingly are signing this new contract, knowing that there's a pandemic, that travel is no longer part of, travel or COVID or pandemic or masks, those kind of things. As long as the state is open and we are able to gather, then we are able to have that event. I think that's really been a huge one for all of us, especially with the state laws changing or every state having a different gathering order.
Yeah, some type of acknowledgement of COVID and then complete no rescheduling due to COVID for any reason. Because at this time, like Brandee's saying, it's really voluntary on behalf of the clients. They could make some accommodations or change some things up to still have it on that date, probably. Especially in the US, it's a little bit different for international clients sadly, because you're dealing with travel and can you get here and all of these things. But for, I would say the continental US, it's going to be a voluntary choice on their behalf to change their wedding date. And so when you're able to issue a new contract, I would suggest you have that type of clause in there. I would suggest that you go back and look at your if you have another kind of standard cancellation and rescheduling clause, what those look like and make sure they don't contradict. You could even explicitly put in language there for any reason other than COVID-19, these policies would apply. Then you have your COVID clause. And then like Brandee and I have kind of talked about, you may want to look at kind of revising your fee schedule. In that first clause in your contract should be everything surrounding fees and retainers and payments in general. Make sure you have language in there surrounding liquidated damages of retainers, that they're absolutely non-refundable. For wedding planners in particular, probably take out the language transferable if you have that anywhere in your contract. So it's really clear cut.
Yeah, all work done, that because for planners especially, we are able to show that work has been done. So the payments, even following the retainer, are for work done. And so that's really, really important because you are working for that money. It's no longer just holding a date.
Yes, exactly. Putting those in honestly like bullet point format in that fee section. This payment is for this amount of work over this time period for phase 1, which includes XYZ purposes. Like you can be that detailed and it's going to benefit you more in the long run if some hiccup were to occur with a dispute over payments and things that you've worked on and earned.
Yeah. And I think a lot of our clients right now, we're in engagement season. We're recording this in January. So it's engagement season all over the world. And most clients at this point, even if they don't understand the clause, are looking for either the term COVID-19 or pandemic in your contract. Just we've had so many that'll say, if we get shut down again, it's going to be covered, right? And so really understanding your own clause and helping them to feel safe signing your contract, understanding that of course, if there, was another shutdown or there was an inability for us to be able to have your event, of course that's covered, but also making sure that you're covered as well. So I definitely feel like we're getting that question a lot is, can you show me your pandemic clause or can you show me your COVID clause? And so getting those from over at the Legal Paige shop has been really helpful.
Oh, well, thanks. Yeah. And I think that line of communication too, right? Another question I have that a lot of people ask me all the time is, do you wait for clients to contact you for what's your like COVID policy, or are you sending those out to clients and kind of initiating the conversation?
Yeah, it depends on the client. I mean, if they signed their contract post March of last year, we're not really having that conversation again, unless it affects them. If we know that their date is coming up and the venue either isn't reopened or something like that, then we'll initiate that conversation. But for the most part, at this point, I mean, we've talked to everybody. They've either rescheduled or they've signed post-COVID. And so those conversations are happening really on the front end and right away with their planners. And so those conversations are happening. And I think that that's really, really important, especially in the beginning. I remember so many planners that first 2 weeks when this was all happening, they were like, do I reach out to my clients? How far out should I be reaching out? And I'm like, reach out. Like they're freaking out. So just call them. And even if you don't know what to say that. Say, we're in this together. We're learning together. Like I'm here for you. And I think that goes a long way. So it depends on where they are in their journey, but for sure we try to get in front of them if we know that, there's going to be any kind of concern.
Yeah. And I think full service wedding planners, if you're listening in and maybe you're not one, they have a different relationship with the clients. Your clients expect you to be the one to like contact and be like, is everything okay? Yeah. Here's what's happening. Here's what I'm seeing consistently in the industry. Like you have to have your taps on that. Yeah. Like you have to know what's going on, what's on tap, what is happening, what are most photographers doing, what are most venues doing. Like your clients want you to give them that information on a silver platter. That's what they hired you for. So I was kind of alarmed when some wedding planners were just waiting for their clients to contact them, because I was well, that's not what you're hired for, honestly. No. That's what other vendors, day of vendors are hired for, is like waiting basically until, 30, 60 days before to kind of start talking and communicating and actually working with that client, but not for full service wedding planners. So if you do have any type of like updates, or you are working with clients through kind of a change of date or something along those lines, switching up the game plan for their event in 2021, I would definitely reach out to them. And then like Brandee said, if you don't know what to say, that's okay. Like you can go into that conversation. But what I would heed some advice on here is go into it though with a COVID game plan of what is your business policy surrounding that. Like understand that they may be in a completely different mental space and they don't really know what they don't know, but you should be very professional and prepared with, this is what we're doing consistently with all our wedding planning clients starting in 2021. This is what we're doing for everyone, so that they know, you are willing to move, you're willing to work with them on anything, but your policy is X, and this is what, the amount that they would have to pay additionally, or this is your process. You'll just get rid of, that original contract. It'll be easy peasy. You'll send them a document online and they can sign it. And then you'll just send them a new contract and you guys can get started afresh. Like you just want to be very kind and like open and honest with your clients. That is going to get you the farthest.
I think that's the piece. I mean, really, guys, at the end of the day, it's about having that communication with your clients. And I know with our full service clients, I mean, we become an extension of their family. I literally, as we're sitting here, I got an email for a baby shower invitation for one of my clients that I married like 6.5 years ago. So, I mean, they become an extension of your family, and we want to help them through this process. They're scared, they're overwhelmed. And don't forget that even if you have the most level-headed couple, they have friends and they have family that are in other states that might be in their ear and telling them, you know, the world is melting. The world is melting. How can you possibly have a wedding? So they need someone with some sanity and that's unemotional about this event to kind of just be a sounding board and talk them through that. So it's really, really important. The other thing I would say, especially for full service planners, is I know here in Orlando, one of the things that we're dealing with is we have some venues that are like, COVID? What do you mean? I mean, and I don't mean that in a disrespect. It's just that they're kind of like, hey, we're open, we're abiding by the guidelines, but guidelines say we can be open as long as we have masks. So they're like, game on. And then there's other venues that are like, no, we're putting our own restrictions on it. I mean, we have major hotels that aren't allowing dancing, and you really can't even get up from your table except to go to the restroom and come back. And there's so many guidelines. So you need to be aware of what those guidelines are at every single venue where you have a full service wedding happening, and getting in front of those clients to say, here's the policies that your venue has put into place. Do you feel comfortable with that to move forward? And let's have a conversation. If not, because you don't want them finding out at their menu tasting, 90 days before their event, and you knew all along. So it's really important to stay abreast, like Paige is saying, of all of the things that are going on with your clients, with their venue, with their vendors. Also knowing what vendors are still in business. If there's any of your clients that are working with somebody who's not in business anymore, or that's, maybe having a challenge, like staying abreast of that. So they are looking to us to handle all the details, and that's really what they're paying us for. So we should be doing that for sure.
Yes, yes, yes. I'm like clapping and nodding my head over here. And then, I think it's best to wrap up with kind of some legal tips for people, especially in the full service wedding planning industry. I would definitely suggest at this point that you update your contract for new clients, and you update your contract for clients that are basically rebooking for a new date with you. And if you are in the full service wedding planning business, not day of wedding planning, because I think that's more along the lines of our previous episode on rescheduling fees, if you're in full service wedding planning, you're not charging a fee. You're essentially just canceling that contract, having them sign some type of cancellation agreement with some nice, kind language in there that explains to them why you're doing this, what fees have been paid, what services you've performed. If you're transferring any amount, if any, at all over to your new contract. And if not, then you just have them sign that, and then you send them a new contract that you've updated. So legally speaking, that's what I suggest is probably going to be your best bet for full service planners. Brandee, anything else do you want to leave people with? Any like quick tips that you've heard of maybe in your clubhouse rooms over the past couple of weeks?
I think the best tip is, Betsy Krug is her name, Paige. I looked her up on Clubhouse. Her partner is Becky. That's why we were getting Becky, but it's Betsy Krug with Rebecca Rose Events. And when she came up to the stage in Clubhouse, she just made such a great point that I even reiterated to my team, was just, guys, listen, we are front line with our clients. We owe it to our industry to be educating our clients and saying, this is what it could look like if you really want to move forward with a postponement, because at this point it is a choice unless something changes in the world. Over this year, right now, it's a choice to postpone your wedding. Yes, I know it's scary, but as their wedding planner and just as kind of that frontline person to the client, it really is our job to be letting them know to expect that they'll be paying postponement or rescheduling fees with each of their vendors, because we don't want them to be surprised by that. And we don't want those vendors to be having to have those tough conversations over and over and over again. That's why vendors love working with full service planners, because we bring them our clients already educated and they know what's going on. So they should be expecting those fees from vendors at this point if they want to move forward with postponement. So I think that's my biggest tip, is just make sure that you're educating your clients from that first conversation when they first say, I think we might need to postpone. Just educate them on what that looks like, not just for you, but for all of their entire vendor team.
And you guys, guess who's a really good educator? Brandee. So if you are looking for a really awesome coach on kind of full service wedding planning, or you're looking to take your planning business to the next level, I would definitely suggest you reach out to Brandee. Brandee, where can they find you at?
Yeah, thank you so much, Paige. My website is brandeegaar.com. You can check that out. And I love hanging out on Instagram and Clubhouse. So I'm on all the platforms, but the ones that I'm probably most active on are Instagram, and I'm at Brandee Gaar over there. And on Clubhouse, I'm at Brandee Gaar. I feel like I'm always in Clubhouse. And I love answering DMs. I love voice chatting people back and forth because it's just easier with 3 little girls to voice chat everything back and forth. So yeah, come find me in any of those places.
And I am of actual person that has done this with Brandee. So she really does voice message, and we've become really good internet friends, virtual friends, because of how awesome Brandee is at communicating online. So it's Brandee with 2 E's and Gaar with 2 A's. I think that was the easiest way for me to find you. But again, you guys, so you can always reach out to Brandee. And then if you do have any other additional questions surrounding the legalities of using full service wedding planning contracts or any type of rescheduling agreement or cancellation agreement, you can always find those at thelegalpaige.com, or you can ask me. You guys know I'm the Legal Paige everywhere as well on any of the platforms, and I can kind of walk you through the process a little bit more if you want to continue on the conversation. But Brandee, thank you so much for jumping on. This was such a good, fruitful conversation, and I appreciate your input so much.
Yes, I loved it. Thanks so much, Paige. Thank you guys for having me.
Okay, bye now. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Legal Paige Podcast. See, I told you being legally legit isn't so scary. Be sure to visit thelegalpaige.com for all show notes. And it would be super awesome if you could head over to iTunes and leave a review. Last but not least, don't forget to join my free Facebook group for unlimited legal and biz Q&A. Chat soon, Legal Pagers.